This is House Planning Help, episode 333. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build or retrofit. I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guests are Brendan and Ludka Powell, and we're exploring the One Planet Development initiative. So these last few weeks, I've been busy working on videos for the UK Passivhaus Awards, and the ceremony has just been and gone again. It went down so well, and it's lovely always to chat to people. That's one of the things that I enjoy when we're out filming as well. Some of the winning housing projects, though, are all people that we know and we've had on the podcast. Harry Paticus, the Bowman's Lee retrofits, we've chatted to him. Cannock Mill co-housing, we've talked about that project before. Vary Grant and Martin McRae at Ostro. But today we're off to Wales for a project that has just got so much going for it. Just before we move on from the topic of the UK Passivhaus Awards, for me, a personal highlight was meeting a couple of people who are really professionals in their early career, just achieving so much. So Heather McNeil from AD Practice, Jonathan Davies, who's involved in this project that we're just going to hear about. And I thought, if you're doing this now, that's always what we hope for in this industry, that the knowledge that gets built up can be passed directly on to the next set of professionals. And instead of having to reinvent the wheel, they can just pick up what works and go with it and then build on top of that. So great stuff. Parky Rudden is our focus today, and it didn't win a UK Passivhaus Award, but it was in a tough category, and I did wonder whether it was going to be a three-way tie. They actually decided, and this hasn't happened before, that there were two winners, Cannock Mill Co-Housing and Ostro Passivhaus. But there is lots to love on this project, as we're going to hear. So Brendan and Ludka Powell are the self-builders, and we're going to explore the One Planet Development initiative. I started by asking Brendan how this all began.
In 2008, we found an old house which was semi-ruin around the corner from where we are now in Hebron. So we bought that. It had a bit of land with it. It wasn't as much land as we really wanted, but it had a nice bit of land with it. And we spent 3 or 4 years doing that house up.
So basically in the previous house, we have slept in every room of the house. We have moved from a bedroom to living room to the kitchen. Before we had children, it was possible. We could take 3 years doing it room by room and as the money was coming. But then whenever we were there, we always thought about doing something more wholesome, bringing the life and the work a little bit closer to the line, back to basics, and make it more sustainable. The house, what we had, was very expensive in running. It was expensive in heating. It was always cold. And even that we've done everything what we could, it was always damp and there was nothing you could do about it.
Who is researching here? Because you both have a very high knowledge of sustainability. So how did that develop?
I think it's something that we've been interested in ever since we first met. We've always been interested in growing stuff, just in having a sustainable lifestyle in general. It's something that we've always been keen on, and it's something that we looked to do in our previous house, but we found that the land we had was really more woodland. It wasn't really suited to growing lots of crops and that sort of thing. So then we started to think, well, maybe we needed a bit more land. And we met somebody through one of the local schools where our daughter was going, who was doing a One Planet development. And as soon as I learnt a bit more about that, it just seemed immediately the right thing for us to do. It seemed like it's something that had to be done.
When we met, we were in contact with various communities. We were traveling around the world. We've met in Australia. And we always wanted to find out, okay, this is how we are living, but is it actually the best way to live? And can we find a different way, what it's concentrated on outside, a little bit more going back to basic, making the things what used to make people happy.
This is a great opportunity to find out more about One Planet. I know some basics, but fill me in. If we're looking at this, what is it all about?
To put it very basically, it's a Welsh Government initiative that started in 2010, and it allows you to get planning permission to build on agricultural land. It's designed to get people back to living and working in the countryside. As everybody probably knows, that over the last 100 years, everybody wants to live in cities, but there's still a lot the countryside has to offer. But we need to get people back to living and working, growing food locally. All these things are aspirations of the Welsh Government. It also means that you've got to have a sustainable lifestyle, so with as low a carbon footprint as you can possibly manage. So we've got a zero carbon house. We also need to produce our own power on the site, so we've got photovoltaics for that. We need to deal with our own waste from the site, and we need to grow our own food.
Most of the people have waste exported. We don't export our waste. We have sophisticated composting systems. So we have a wet toilet inside the house, but we actually are able to compost our solids. So our waste goes through separator and all the liquids go into double system of reed beds. And the solids just rot down until they become compost and we use them on the trees. So there is nothing what we have to export from here, what is no longer useful. And with family life, it is so important to be able to support the way how you live with your own food. So aspiration of the One Planet life is that you produce 60% of your food on site. There is a lot of things what we overproduce. We sell a lot of salad to local shops. We sell our sauerkraut, so we grow cabbages, we ferment them, we jar them, and then we sell them. And obviously this is an income. We can use this income to
meet our basic needs. Basic needs are things like your council tax, running your car, your IT, your phone bill, and the food that you can't produce on site is also part of your basic needs. So therefore, you've got 5 years to get your One Planet development up to scratch where you're meeting your basic needs from the site. Having got halfway through, it is a pretty big ask, but we are on schedule to do it. We rely a little bit at the moment because we're still finishing building and still finishing setting up, so we rely a little bit on having some help from volunteers who are great, who help us with looking after the veg gardens and things like that. But they also learn a lot about sustainable life and permaculture, and they seem to get an awful lot from it too. So it's a two-way thing that works really well.
Now, I'm intrigued by this 5 years. What happens? You make it sound either like you're going to get something at 5 years or there's a penalty to pay at 5 years.
Well, I think that it's one of those things that it's very difficult to sort of quantify how you're going to be doing in 5 years' time. You've got to make a business plan. Every year you have to do a progress report. And at the end of 5 years, I'm sure that if you're on the right track and you haven't quite reached all your targets by 5 years, then you write a second business plan and you say, well, this is going to happen, and then we haven't got there yet, but this is how it works, basically.
Also, we are talking at the moment about things what we can quantify. So we are talking about the percentage of our income, because you have to quantify things in order to be able to see if it works or not. But we haven't mentioned the very important parts of the One Planet where we are actually trying to regenerate the land. So from the monoculture and blanket farming, having fields and fields of cows or the same crop, we are trying to bring biodiversity. We are trying to grow crops along the animals. We are farming organically, and we are not all the time focusing on profits. So some decisions what we make are going to be beneficial in another 10 years. So we have planted big orchard, and we try to work with the nature. We try to allow the insects to do what they are doing, and hopefully we can keep all the caterpillars of our cabbages by planting enough marigolds next to them. And we will lose some, but generally speaking, we get really great cabbages,
Yeah, and we've also planted an extra acre of woodland, which will attract wildlife. We keep bees to help pollinate, and we produce quite a bit of honey from our bees too. So it's a holistic process to get the whole thing working properly.
All of this sounds like a mammoth task, I know from my own garden, which is not very big. So looking at the word sustainable, is this something that is sustainable?
That's a good question.
Difficult question. I think it is sustainable. Having done it, I think doing it all in 5 years is a really, really big ask. Give us 10 years and I think that everything will be perfectly fine. We might not be doing everything right and everything as we're supposed to after 5 years, but certainly by the end of 10 years, when we've got a really productive orchard and when a lot of the woodland has grown and we're attracting more and more wildlife, then I think the whole thing will become much more sustainable.
There is also this whole concept of putting monetary value on things, what you do. The difficulty with the world, how we are functioning, is that little people like us are competing against supermarkets. So you can go to supermarket and buy a bag of salad for, don't know how much because I grow it. But the locally sourced food starts gaining more and more appreciation. So I think people actually do come out of their way to come to people like us. And the more of us it's going to become, maybe people will be able to actually start thinking, oh, hang on, before I go to the supermarket, why I just won't go and see what those guys down the road have. And then the whole traveling of the food will start going back to the basics, and we are going to be able to grow. So as Brendan said, 10 years, I think it's a lot more realistic target. And it is sustainable in this sort of way that we put a lot of energy into the land, but we get a lot of energy from it. It is very fulfilling job for us, but it is an awful lot what you have to do in very short period of time.
So the time aspect of this, have you got any other income? You clearly sell some of your produce, but how does that work? And we have to come and talk about the house in a minute, but let's just finish up on how you survive. That we are in this fantastic house, but yeah, day-to-day living.
So day-to-day living, we spend most of our time working here on the land, but we also both have part-time work, which we do outside. We run a small garden maintenance business, and Ludka looks after holiday cottage changeovers as well, and she has a couple of women that help her every week.
We basically work 2 days per week out, more or less.
Yeah. And we don't have expensive lifestyles, and we're lucky enough to have done all this without having a mortgage. So our outgoings are fairly low. We're not into expensive holidays or anything like that. So we live a fairly modest lifestyle, and we're aiming to meet all the requirements of the OPD, basically.
It's not that we sacrifice. Our just nature is that we are quite content with what we've got. We don't have other needs. And if we did have different needs, then we would look differently. But our home doesn't cost us because we are off-grid. We have council tax to pay. We are living in Passivhaus. As long as we make sure that we maintain everything working well within this environment, we actually don't need to earn a lot of money.
So the planning permission side of this One Planet scheme, building a house in itself is a huge project. So can that be a slight distraction from what you've got to do outside? You've got to do two things at once.
It does take up a big part of it, and it's taken up a big part of our time over the last 2 years or so. A lot of people that do One Planet developments build houses under the Caravan Act. So they build a slightly different house, which means that they don't have to go through building regs. But we felt with our family we needed a bigger house. So yeah, that's what we did.
It is like starting two massive things. People say the biggest thing you've ever done in your life is build your house.
Yeah.
And then you have to build your business and turn the piece of wasteland into ecological heaven. They are huge asks. But it seems that One Planet Development attracts very determined people who are really driven, who really care about the future of this world. And if you have children and you are living in this world, you think, we really can't carry on like we are. There has to be a different way. So maybe One Planet development policy, it's not perfect, but it's an experiment to try to take the society towards the right direction, to see how we can do it better. So we all need somewhere to live because our ecological footprint for the environment where we live, it's one of the biggest ones. So if we can make sure that the space what we live is actually ecologically sound.
And also living on site helps you reduce that by not having to travel to where you're working every day. So that's a big difference. Also, as Ludka was just talking about, there's a One Planet Council which has recently done a review of the whole One Planet system and how it's been working over the last 12 years. It was done last year. And they've shown that it can be very successful, that the existing One Planets, although there's not a huge amount of them, the existing developments have been successful and are doing a great job in, one, trying to feed people locally, in sustainability and in the ecology of their land, etc. But there's also several flaws in the whole thing which need to be addressed, and we need to attract more people to doing One Planet developments. And there's certain recommendations that they've made which hopefully will be added to the legislation to help people coming along in the future.
What are the pros and cons then of off-grid living?
Well, off-grid living, I think it helps us to be self-reliant. I think that's one of the main parts about it. We're self-reliant. We can't just go and switch on our electric oven at 9 o'clock at night in December because we want to heat something up. We have to think about what we're doing.
And our children, they are growing up with thinking, we are going to have a bag of sweets. Those sweets, they will create pile of plastic. Okay, what is going to happen with it? Because we don't have throwaway culture in our house. Whatever it is, it's here.
And by dealing with all our own waste, it's the same principle. It's very easy in a normal house just to go and flush the toilet, and what's in your toilet gets taken away and you never see it again, never think about it. We have to constantly think about what we're doing with our waste. We have to keep an eye on everything. It makes us more self-reliant and it makes us think about what we're doing, which I think would be good for everybody.
Any downsides that you've noticed?
It's labor intense, and our ratio is 2 grown-ups to 3 children, so we are outnumbered. The children are great, they help with lots, but it is still our responsibility to make sure that everything is done. We have to keep on top of the things, and if things get forgotten, they become bigger responsibility for us.
Let's talk about the house then and how this slotted into the plan. So you had this old traditional house that was cold and damp. Where do you go from there?
We wanted a house that was going to cost us very little to run, not need lots of heating. We could have made a house that was less insulated, but then we thought, well, we'd have to be spending more of our time on our One Planet development creating firewood to burn in the house.
What is not really great for environment.
Which is also not great for the environment, that's right. But also the time taken to chop down trees, chop it up, keep it for X amount of time before it's able to be burnt. By doing what we're doing, we've saved an awful lot of that. The amount of wood that we use is much, much smaller than, for example, we were using when we were living in our temporary accommodation. We had a wood burner and we were burning wood pretty much all day and half the night. And whereas here, we only need enough wood just to, in the winter anyway, just to cook our dinner on our cooker. And that gives us enough residual heat to heat water, etc., etc. So having minimal input into running the house was one of our main criteria in building it, and we decided that a passive house would be really the best way to do that.
We really like the idea of passive house, and we thought that this initial cost, what you are putting, it's also obviously building materials, they have environmental cost, but the initial cost, it's really well spent because then you don't have actually any other carbon footprint, but also any financial outgoings. So then we tried to marry the two concepts. So One Planet Life means sustainable materials or reused materials. And then this is why we thought, well, straw-bale passive house, it just seems like the solution to our problems. And the environment of the straw-bale house is just so great that we thought this is the best way of going forward for us.
Now, just to clarify here a second, so what utilities have you got coming to site versus generation, so forth?
We don't have anything coming to site. So we have our own water on site for a borehole. We produce all our electricity from solar photovoltaics. We've got 2 separate systems, and we deal with our own waste through a composting toilet and reed bed system.
Is that One Planet, everyone has to do this?
Yeah, basically. I mean, there are certain things that you can, if there's mains water on site, you can use mains water, for example. That's not really that much of a problem.
There are many different sustainable solutions, what you can decide how you are going to deal with your waste, and any of them are good. But generally speaking, not exporting your waste, it's one of the principles.
Straw is something that they always make fantastic houses, but not necessarily always high performance houses. So you were confident going into this?
We were confident. I mean, I think the Eco-Cocon people that we were dealing with told us it would be like it is, and in reality it's turned out to be exactly like they said it would, so that's worked really, really well. I think in a normal straw bale house, to get it up to passive house standards is quite difficult, but with the Eco-Cocon system, there's the Styco wood fibre insulation which goes on the outside, which then brings the house, it completely wraps around the coat, it's like a winter coat. and then that brings the insulation up to the required levels.
After doing this panel system with the straw, you follow all the principles of passive house building. So you are following all the air tightness principles. You install all your windows with attention to detail to make sure that there aren't any air leaks. You do all the taping on all the junctions, on all connections. So once the main structure is up, we are just thinking about it like a normal passive house.
Yeah, it's all in the detail.
Now, being off grid, I'm thinking about the MVHR now. So how do you keep it running?
Well, the MVHR uses very little power, actually. It only uses 20 to 30 watts all the time. So there are a few days in the middle of December and January when there's not very much light, and then we'll run the MVHR in the day and we'll switch it off at night, and it doesn't have any detrimental effect by doing that.
Over the last year, we have worked out that we have 2 inverters, and we have one inverter what doesn't use much power at all, but it can't use our appliances. So this has been like a revolution in our life really last winter, because the big inverter can use almost one whole battery of power just by being switched on.
It uses about over 2 kilowatt hours per day just to run the inverter. So we fitted a smaller inverter which still runs the MVHR and runs the lights and laptops, etc. But that only uses a very small amount of power. So we can just easily switch from one to the other. And yeah, that's revolutionised our ability to survive the winter without getting short on power, basically.
Let's go back to the design process of the house. What did you want from it to begin with? We know high performance is on the agenda. What else?
Ludka wanted a veranda. I think I wanted a veranda too. We managed to incorporate a wraparound veranda, also dealing with the shading of the house in the summer.
Was that intentional? Why did you want this veranda?
We wanted to have somewhere where you can live outside. As Welsh climate, it's known for being not very dry. But when it's dry, it's hot and it's overheating the rooms. So we wanted to have somewhere to live outside, but also we started thinking about the concept of overheating. And then there has been a lot of thought put into it to make sure that we actually incorporate the shading over the house into the veranda concept. So then the shading, it's not too big, but not too small at the right angle to let the sun in when we need to get passive heating inside the house, but to not get the house overheated in the summer. And this works just amazing.
This works really, really well.
It's
one of the most successful parts of the house.
Yeah, ninja overheating strategy here that I always enjoy it when I can come and look at where the sun is shining in and I can tell it just, well, not even just, it misses the windows.
And we're not even at midsummer yet.
Exactly, so, yeah. Exactly. And then you're quite pleased with when you start to get the gains again.
Last autumn we were in this house. We were just amazed how warm it continued to be when the air temperatures outside started cooling down, but we were getting so much sun inside we've never even thought, oh, it could be warmer. It never came across our heart.
And a sunny day in winter, the sun shines through the windows, it warms the floor up, and it keeps the whole house warm till the next day, and it really works.
And in the summer, we never think about opening the windows. And the number of people who have visited us and they say, well, but how do you feel without opening the windows? Well, we never feel we want to open the windows.
You can do.
We can do. We have plenty
and
to.
We sometimes open the big doors here and, when we're using the veranda.
If we want to, we can open it. We just never feel like there is need for it.
Well, that's fine, yeah, if you're looking at it that way.
I was going to say some other things that we wanted in the house.
Oh, yes. It was supposed to be very practical, almost like utility house, house has to work for family. Everyone has to have their own space, but we need to have a big space where we can all be together so everyone can sit, but everyone can have their own private space. We wanted to bring our working environment into the house so we can process all our vegetables and prepare them for sale, have office so we don't have to go somewhere and be frozen in a little cabin at the end of the garden.
Like in our last house.
So they were the main principles. So we could live all together, bring our work environment into the life, but have private space where we can rest.
You used an architect who was a friend of yours at afar.
It's a very good friend of ours, Michał Rudnicki. I grew up in Poland and I met him when I was in university in Warsaw. He is Polish-born but grew up in Canada and he studied architecture in Canada and then subsequently he came back to Poland and is practicing architecture there. But Our budget has been very small from the very beginning. We could not afford really to do what we aspired to do, and we were very determined to find a way.
And we were lucky we knew people like Michał who helped us for free, basically. So
we called Michał and we said, look, this is what we are going to do, and if there is any other crazy person who will think that we can pull it off, it's going to be you. Do you want to help us? And he said, yeah, I will help you.
He didn't have much expertise in passive house building, but his brother is a passive house builder in Canada. So I think he used his brother a little bit for some of the ideas and to help him with the technical aspects of it all.
The best thing about this was that he has asked us when we were starting to go into separate rooms and both write a list of the most important things for us, what we want from this house. And he said, and then we will definitely stick to number one on each list, and everything else is going to be a compromise. It hasn't been everything, but it worked well. So we both had actually the veranda as number 1 or 2 on our list because we thought it's just so crucial for our life. But our extravagancy is the height here.
That double space height we really like the idea of. And the other thing that we wouldn't compromise on is that Ludka wanted a concrete floor. So
it's just we live in a muddy field. Sweeping any other floor all the time is just a nightmare. But this is just so easy to maintain for us. So it's, again, the practicality aspect.
And it also meant that when we laid the concrete floor, we haven't had to buy carpets or nice wood flooring or anything like that. It's just... So it saved us a lot of money from that point of view.
We have actually hand-floated the floor. We wanted to have it properly polished, but again, it was the lockdown and it was all very complicated. And to get all the machinery, people and everything together, it was beyond...
In one day was impossible.
Impossible. And then a friend of ours, Ben Griffiths, he said, don't worry, I think we can do it, guys. He came here with floats and Brendan was helping as well. And we have come up with this floor and we love it.
I get the impression that you've both been very engaged in everything, which is actually, it's quite hard. You sometimes find one person is leading the way. So how have you achieved that, or are you just both very passionate?
Yeah, we haven't quite battered each other to death yet, so we had a few problems along the way. But
Michał, who has helped us to design this house, he said the biggest achievement for any architect is if the clients will stay together until they pay the invoice. Obviously, we didn't pay Michał.
Don't know what that says then, but we're still together. So.
But we are still together and sort of starting to be able to laugh about all of this. It has been incredibly intense. I think what we have learned, we have run businesses together for a number of years. We have learned to delegate. So I don't deal with carpentry as a general rule. I do the wet things. So I have done a lot of clay plastering. All the clay here, it's pigmented. So the top coat, I have mixed all the natural pigments into it. And when I was mixing it to start with, I asked Brendan, do you like this color? And Brendan said, you know what, just make decisions, just do it. And this is how we have done it. There were certain things what Brendan decided about, there were certain things I decided about, and certain things what we both have, okay, I feel strongly about it.
We both need to do this bit.
Yeah, we have to ask actually each other's opinion about it. I think we also had, by this time, enough trust in each other's ability.
And Brendan, what have you done on this project versus when you thought someone else should be doing this?
I haven't really thought that anybody else should be doing it. There's a few things that I thought, blimey, this is a lot of work for one person to do. Ludka and I have been involved in pretty much everything, right from the groundworks up to the finishing touches, all the interior woodwork we've done.
Foundations.
We had help from builders with putting the main structure of the house together.
But you still were helping.
But I was still working with those guys. Even with putting the tin roof on, I was helping with that.
Plasterboarding. There is far too much plasterboard or boarding the walls with whatever board you are boarding.
I worked with one other guy and we did all the interior boarding, just the two of us. And that was a long, tedious job.
And decorating, I have decorated
and
the
whole
whole
done all the painting,
thing myself. Yeah. There is a lot of ceilings when you have to paint them.
One aspect of this that's quite interesting is you're in rural Wales with no mobile phone signal. So has that caused any complications?
Well, this was actually, from my point of view, this was the biggest complication because there is no mobile signal anywhere around here. So in order to answer a mobile phone, we would have to drive a mile out from here. and we didn't have the phone connection or internet connection, and those were very hard to get here.
It took forever to get BT to come and connect up a temporary line to one of our sheds.
It was over 6 months before we could get anything here. So we were basically building a house without being able to talk to people who needed to contact us in order to find us. It was just absolute nightmare.
Just coming back to One Planet as we round off this conversation. So when we've got the house and you're developing it as a passive house, are there any other aspects that One Planet feeds into the project?
One of the main things is the use of recycled materials wherever possible. We've used recycled foam glass in the floor. We've obviously got straw panels, which we've already mentioned. The roof is insulated with cellulose, which is basically recycled newspaper.
Wood fibre board is also the waste.
Wood fibre board is also made from wood fibre. But inside the house, we've also, for example, used a kitchen that was taken out from another house because they were getting a new kitchen, and we've managed to make that into our kitchen. We've done the same with some of the bathroom fittings and somewhere else as well.
Utility room.
In the utility room, we've used recycled sink and recycled units. So we've done a lot of things. But it's also saved us quite a bit of money. I mean, kitchens these days cost a fortune, and it's cost us next to nothing basically to do quite a nice kitchen.
So how have you worked out when is a good time to spend the money versus when is a good time to save? What are your cost savings?
Construction was always the most important thing for us. We have spent money very carefully on construction, but we always went for the best solution we possibly can, because this is something what we can't replace. If we have a kitchen,
hopefully we'll never have to replace. Yeah.
But with the kitchen,
replace,
it really doesn't matter. It is already a recycled product. So if we'll have to replace it, it's not the end of the world. It's very easily solvable. We can build something, repair it. But if the construction it's not put right, it's very difficult to correct this. With going to the One Planet also, we haven't talked about using local produce. So all the cladding, it's made of local larch from within 10 miles of here. All our architraves, they are made of local ash. There are windowsills, what we have made out of little
ash
pieces,
and
the oak,
yeah.
what we have from various random places. So all of this, it's locally sourced. It's another very important principle of One Planet development.
Do you have any advice if someone is looking at this framework and thinking, I'd like to go down the One Planet route?
I think you need to be quite strong-minded.
Resourceful?
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for, resourceful, yeah.
Dedicated. Never underestimate how much you have to do. Never give up. And there is solution to everything. Someone has told us when we started that we are entering a never-ending problem-solving exercise. And this is exactly...
We've become really good at researching and solving problems.
And whenever we come to the point where we think, God, there is no way out from this one, we think, okay, so what are the options? And quite often we start with it, well, the option is just forget about it all and just let's start again. But say, okay, and what is the next option? And what is the next option? And actually, very quickly we find the option what is actually very doable, very possible, and not so hard, and we can move forward.
I like it. Finally, what has it been like living both in the house and on the land?
Living in the house is great. I think the whole process has been strenuous, to say the least, to start with, but we're only halfway through our 5-year plan, so we've still got plenty of time left to get everything going, and we're hoping that things will get easier as we move along.
It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've done a few things before, but it also has brought a sense of integrity to life. And the thing, you have to continuously pick yourself up from failure, because crops fail, buildings don't go the way how you do, but somehow it all makes sense at the end. And I think this is very good. And also
there's a big sense of community within the One Planet movement itself. We recently held a spring gathering here and many of the other OPDs came, and we spent an afternoon together discussing how we were getting on and problems, etc. So there's a big sense of community.
And care for environment, for the way how we live, for the way how the future will live. It makes us feel we are the people who need to take responsibility. And somehow it feels that we are doing really our best to take our own responsibility. So this makes it worth it. It's hard, but it makes it worth it.
Well, Ludka and Brendan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Head online to take a look at the show notes that accompany this session, houseplanninghelp.com/333. Review the key points. You can also check out the short video to get some visuals on the project. I just think they made a lot of good decisions. I was wondering whether some of that might be to do with how far down the road they were on sustainable living anyway. It's clear that they knew a lot about it to begin with. So when it comes to building a house, does that give you an advantage? And they'd clearly done renovation and things like that before. I also want to highlight the shading because I've visited many passive houses over the years and few of it get the summer comfort spot on. They all do well. You know, my house included will not go over 25, 26. But there's a but there. I have to do the night cooling. And so there are still some gains during the day. And I think that this so impressive that they do absolutely nothing and they get those really low temperatures in there. And it's all the design of the house, no electronic blinds, no intervention. It's just having that external shading. And I think George McKerchick behind how it precisely starts to get its gains at the right time of year. Clever stuff. And I was standing in there thinking, if I do this again, I'm going to go down this route because this vernacular or this way of making the building do the work, you still get all the light coming in. That still looks good, but you don't get the sun. And there's a big difference. And as a passive house dweller, I just think that's the next level up. You know, the summer comfort is a huge benefit, particularly as we go into these turbulent years ahead. If you've got a comment or you'd like to ask a question, you can do that in the show notes. We'll also link you to people like Huff and Puff Construction, EcoCocon, One Planet Development, where you can get more information. houseplanninghelp.com/333. My call to action is to check out the Hub. And this is our membership community that we've been running for many years. We've recently had a knowledge share. One of our Hub members, Paul Ashby, has installed some solar PV, and that involved a lot of researching and then specifying. So we've had a chat with him about what he's learnt. Also, some exciting news. We've got our first regular expert. And what that means is Ez Trazida, who is our man who's going to be here every 3 months, all sorts of interesting skills. You might have heard of him already. He's a passive house consultant. He has tackled his own retrofit. He upskilled in DIY. But every quarter, we're going to have a chat with him. You can pose your questions. And if this goes well, we may well onboard a few other specialists in different areas as well. So that in the Hub too. We've got our courses. We've got the forum, our live training sessions with guest experts. houseplanninghelp.com/join. That's it for another day. Thank you so much for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.